now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thanks. Please be seated. Honourable members, the only item on today's order paper is questions addressed to the President, which stood over from the 18th October 2018. Honourable members may press the talk button on their desks if they wish to ask a supplementary question. And I wish to remind honourable members that the names of members requesting supplementary questions will be cleared as soon as the Honourable President starts answering the fourth supplementary question. Honourable members, before we proceed, I would also like to remind you that question number 19 was approved as an urgent question for today's question session in terms of Rule 1415. As a result, the question will take precedence over all other questions. The question has been asked by the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition. I request the Honourable, the President, to proceed to the podium. And I invite the Honourable, the President, to answer the question.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, honourable members. Let me start by thanking you for your indulgence, for having been understanding. When I was supposed to answer questions here, I was indisposed, and you were kind enough to allow a postponement of this session to enable me to answer questions today. So I thank you for your understanding. Shortly after becoming president, I received briefings from various matters by different government departments. One of these briefings was from the National Treasury, where I was alerted to alleged corruption at the VBS Mutual Bank. I was informed that the South African Reserve Bank, specifically the Prudential Authority, had initiated an investigation into this matter. In response to my request for a comprehensive report on VBS, I received a briefing from Treasury as well as from the Reserve Bank on the report that was submitted by Advocate Terry Mudau just before its public release. The report presents a deeply disturbing picture of theft and corruption on a massive scale. It is essential that all those who are responsible for facilitating this fraud and this corruption, and all those who have benefited from it, must be held accountable. We call on all the relevant institutions, and in fact, we insist that all relevant institutions must act swiftly to prosecute those responsible, but also to move with greater speed to recover the funds stolen from the bank's depositors, because most of these depositors are pensioners, old men and women who had put their life savings into VBS, and there are also stockfels and burial societies who are struggling as it is now to bury their dead because their money is lost. but it is also the municipalities of various areas in our country. Action must also be taken against those municipal officials, and in some cases they include political officials who deposited council funds into VBS, knowing that it was not legal and whose actions could lead to significant financial losses for those municipalities. It is particularly, Madam Speaker, disturbing that many of the people who have suffered loss as a result of these crimes are the poor rural residents of our country. It is critical that every effort is made to recover those monies, to minimize losses suffered by the bank depositors. For much of its existence, VBS was a good bank for ordinary people, and it gave loans and mortgages to people in rural areas, and now through greed and deception and theft, that bank has been destroyed. We take a dim view of those who have been implicated in criminal activity, rushing to court to try and hide their malfeasance and not make any effort to apologize to those who have lost money. What they do is to rush to court and not even have a single word of apology to those who have lost money. The real tragedy of VBS is that money was stolen from those in our society who could least afford it. It is a tragedy that has repeated itself across several of our state-owned enterprises, in municipalities, and with respect to several private companies. For the sake of our people and our economy, I believe that we need to make a decisive break with those corrupt activities and build a new era of integrity and honesty in our public as well as public institutions and private institutions. That is why we must act against those who are responsible for destroying VBS and for all those in private companies, in SOEs, and in other parts of the state who are trying to steal our country's future. I thank you.
The Honourable Maimane.
Mr. President, I think I agree with you that what took place at VBS was a complete disgrace. In this particular instance, these are politically connected people who stole money from poor South Africans and their life savings, where the rich are protected and they steal from the poor and the unemployed. This culture is pervasive, Mr. President, for those who are on the inside connected to the ANC and those who are on the outside, which are poor people. Now, Mr. President, here, I hold a proof of payment that was transferred to say R500,000 rands need to be transferred to a trust account called EFG2 on the 18th of October last year. This was allegedly put for your son, Andile Ramaphosa. Following on to that, Mr. President, I have a sworn affidavit from Piet Venter stating that he was asked by the CEO of Bosasa that he must make this transfer for Andile Ramaphosa. Mr. President, we can't have family members benefiting. I would want to ask you right here today that you will bring our nation into confidence and please set the record straight on this matter, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
The Honourable, the President.
No, thank you. Thank you, Honourable Maimane. This matter was brought to my attention. It was brought to my attention some time ago, and I proceeded to ask my son what this was all about. And he runs a business as a financial consultancy business. and he consults for a number of companies, and one of those companies is Bosasa, where he provides services on entrepreneurship, particularly on the procurement process, and he advises both local and international companies. And this payment, I can assure you, Mr. Maimani, that I asked him at close range whether this was money that was obtained illegally, unlawfully, and he said this was a service that was provided, and to this end, he actually even showed me a contract that he signed with Bosasa, and the contract and the contract also deals with issues of integrity, issues of anti-corruption, and all that.
Order. Order, honorable members. Let's listen to the answer of the president. Kuba President.
Now, on this one, I have made sure that I get the information as much as I can, and he is running a clear and honest business as an advisory service. As he has been trained with his business science as a consultant. So I have had no idea or inkling whatsoever in what he has informed me that these monies were obtained illegally. And if it turns out, Mr. Maimani, I can assure you, if it turns out that there is any illegality and corruption in the way that he has dealt with this matter, I will be the first, absolutely first, to make sure that he becomes accountable. Even if it means, I can assure you, even if it means that I'm the one who will take him to the police station, that I will be able to do. Because I am clear about that, and I can let you something else. I have told my children that you do not do any business with a state-owned enterprise. You do not do any business with government. That's what I've told them. But I do know, yes, they listen to me, but I do know from time to time some of these errors, some of these activities can surface. But the filter that I want you to know I apply as their father is that if there is any illegality, if there's any corruption, I am going to be the first one and take them, if need be, to jail myself. That I will do, because I will not allow that. That's what I want you to know.
The Honourable Mulibatsi. The Honourable Mulibatsi. What's happening? Okay, can I call on Honourable Makadla?
Okay, Minister,
What's he
there's
saying?
no further
What's the
question.
issue?
That's nice.
So these were false, okay.
Yes.
Honourable Malema.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Mr. President, we wrote a letter to Honorable Blade Nzimande to ask him if the VBS paid 3 million to Beachwood Hotel for the Communist Party conference. And we're expecting him to answer truthfully and honorably. But the point I'm standing here, Honorable President, is that if the answer you gave is an acceptable answer to your colleagues, then the same answer stands with Brian Shibang. Because it cannot be that if it's your children with contracts and invoices and they can account for the work they've done, it's acceptable. But when it comes to Brian Shibambo, it's a different matter altogether. But my question is, Mr. President, this bank, having formed by the father of the current king, worked very well under the Bantustan, provided services to our people which commercial banks do not provide to rural people. Today, we find ourselves in this situation. Do we close down the school because the principal and the management stole the money of the school fees, and not only the school fees, vandalized the school? Once we come to that conclusion that they've stolen, they've even vandalized the school, do we close the school or do we arrest the culprit and save the school?
The Honourable, the President.
Well, I think that's a good question, but before I get to that, Honourable Malema, let me come back to this one. The question that was asked by Honourable Maimani about my son, Andil, has nothing to do with VBS. I think that should be clear. It has to do with Busasa. So he has not been involved in VBS. VBS is a different matter now. I think the question that Honourable Malema is raising is a very good question. Do we close down the school because the principal has been involved in shenanigans and what have you? And clearly on that we say no. Now, I am one of those, Honourable Malema, who have a great deal of affection and almost loyalty to the VBS, because I've known about VBS way back because it operated in the place where my parents grew up and where I am from originally. Now, the problem with it is that it is laden with a great deal of debt. And the only way to clean it up is to put it into liquidation. However, the notion, the idea of a VBS, in my view, should remain alive, because that is a bank, as you correctly say, that served people in the rural areas, that served the poor, and that is the bank that many poor people in the rural areas had a great deal of confidence in, much more than many other banks. So I would say, in the end, we should revive VBS, maybe 2, raise it from the ashes, and re-establish a VBS which is clean, which will operate along the principles that the original VBS was established for. Once we've cleaned up this mess, I would support that VBS should be re-established and should rise from the ashes. So I agree with you on that score. And you should be applauding Tate Malema. How?
The Honourable Shaikh Imam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, what is very, very clear, that after many, many people in South Africa loot, steal, rob, do everything from the poorest of the poor, we only tend to find out much, much later. Now the question is, do you not believe there's a weakness in the system that we find out at a stage when after the money has already been taken and stolen, the first one? And secondly, based on allegations, many people have paid a very high price in this house. Now the fact that a public rep in this house received 16 million in his account for a person that was owning a spaza shop a week before and gets 16 million and nobody questioned it, shouldn't there be some consequences or suspension from this honourable house for a person of that caliber who did not question how 16 million rand came in?
The Honourable, the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. With regard to preemptive action that needs to be taken, I think we've done very well in terms of looking at the Auditor General's amendment bill. making sure that we give the Auditor General teeth so that if the Auditor General finds that there's any form of malfeasance or corruption that's taking place, they should be able to take action on a proactive basis without waiting as the normal auditing process happens, that they take action later on. So that in itself is going to begin to address the issues that you are raising, Honourable Shaikh, because if we are able to see wrong being done and come in the breach and stop it, all the better. With regard to members who are represented here being involved in these matters, I think, or being suspended or whatever, I think we've got to rely on the rules of Parliament. The ethics processes in Parliament should be able to deal with these matters. And Honourable Speaker, you are the overlady of all these matters, and your ethics committee should be able to deal with these matters of things that are wrongly done by members of Parliament. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Swart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable President, we are in agreement as the ACDP that what happened at VBS is indeed a tragedy. In a more general sense, what is concerning is that such rampant theft, fraud and corruption has repeated itself, as you indicated, across SOCs, municipalities and state departments. And we are indeed facing a severe breakdown in basic morality. We welcome your call for a decisive break to build a new era of integrity and in our institutions. There is indeed a need for intervention, but all of us need to take responsibility. Honourable President, can faith-based organizations, including churches, not play a much greater role in instilling a culture of honesty and integrity in our nation? And should we not be embracing faith-based organizations to start preaching about integrity and honesty, given the moral crisis that we are facing when it comes to looting and pillaging? Thank you, Chair.
The Honourable, the President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think we should be clear that these acts of corruption and malfeasance are not the state-owned enterprises are not the only preserve of such horrible activities. Even the private sector, we have seen unbelievable acts of corruption, theft and malfeasance in the private sector. You just need to name Steinhoff. You just need to name a few of these companies. They are also involved in such. Now, clearly, the real challenge for us as a nation is the issue of morality, the issue of integrity, and when these activities take place, they actually are an attack on the moral fiber of our nation. And that is where all of us have to play a role. It's not only faith-based organizations that should play a role. Political parties themselves must play a role by adhering to their value system. Each political party will claim that they operate on the basis of integrity and all that, but these things still happen. We need to get all sectors of society to recommit themselves to good behavior, to good morals, to integrity, and to make sure that the moral culture in our country is so well promoted. I have been very keen to meet with faith-based organizations to discuss this very issue with them. And so your statement in this regard falls on very fertile ears as far as I'm concerned, because it is one of those issues that I'd like to discuss with them and say, what do we do? What more can we do as a nation? What role can faith-based organizations play in helping to lift the moral fiber of our nation, the integrity of our people as a whole? So in the next coming weeks, that's exactly what I'd like to do, because all of us need to play a role. Yes, the criminal justice system must play its own role. Now, one of the challenges that we face, of course, is that when these things happen, our people who are victims of this become impatient because they see the criminal justice system moving far too slowly. They see people who have been involved in acts of theft just moving around freely without any accountability, happening around them. Now, that is where, for instance, we need a criminal justice system that is more precise, that is very quick in acting, so that we can reinstill the confidence of our people in their criminal justice system. And that is where maybe a discussion with faith-based organizations will also help, because they have a contribution to make. Thank you very much for coming up with that. Thank you.
We now come to question number 20 that has been asked by the Honourable B.A. Hadebe. The Honourable, the President.
The Economic Stimulus and Recovery Plan announced on the 21st of September outlined the decisive steps to rebuild investor confidence and mobilize investments to unlock the growth potential of our economy. The plan in many ways recognizes that infrastructure expansion, as well as maintenance of our infrastructure, is a critical driver of economic activity and has the potential to create a large number of jobs. Government, as we speak, is in the process of setting up the infrastructure fund that we announced, and this fund will manage government's infrastructure expenditure, which has been budgeted at 400 billion rand over the medium-term period, and to focus more on effective execution of such projects. In addition to this budgeted funding, state-owned enterprises will continue themselves to invest in new energy, transport, and water infrastructure. Government is seeking to build meaningful partnerships with the private sector to design the infrastructure fund and oversee project implementation. The fund itself is going to have wonderful benefits in that it is going to reduce fragmentation in infrastructure spend and will work with the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission to strengthen coordination and also will lead to the improvement of delivery. We will draw on individuals who have a range of expertise and who are well experienced in the delivery field, particularly with regard to large projects, including people who know about project management as well as who have engineering skills. The fund will develop a strong pipeline of bankable projects, and many of those projects are already on the table. And they will also help to improve project design. They'll prioritize projects effectively and strengthen the capacity of existing institutions that are tasked with project implementation. Now, National Treasury itself is exploring the possibility of establishing what we would call a blended concessional finance type of solution that will mobilize private as well as public sector funding. Opportunities to draw institutional investors, and there are quite a number of investors who have indicated their willingness to participate, particularly the pension funds, insurance companies are willing to participate in this, and we are exploring all this. And we will draw on the PICC and Government Technical Advisory Center and the Development Bank of South Africa and others to provide the technical assistance that they have. Both the Economic Stimulus and Recovery Plan and the Framework Agreement, as well as that were adopted at the recent Presidential Job Summit, also identified projects and what needs to be done in infrastructure, in mining, in tourism. Government has prioritized a number of key reforms in quite a number of these sectors. Now, as we all know, the mining charter has been revised. This is the outcome of extensive consultation between various role players. And in agriculture, we will finalize the signing of 30-year leases to enable farmers to mobilize funding. Now, all these things are going to add on to the resolve that we have to make sure that the stimulus package works effectively. These are some of the areas where progress is being made, also to remove the obstacles to increase investment and to make more effective use of our public resources to promote growth as well as job creation. I thank you.
The Honourable Khatebe.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable President, during the State of the Nation address, you gave a commitment that you will raise 1.3 trillion rand to reignite the economic growth so that we can fight the scourge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. We are grateful that you have walked the talk of Tumamina and raised more than 400 billion rands from United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and China. What is more important is that after the announcement of the economic stimulus of 50 billion, the investment conference was able to raise the pledges of more than 290 billion rands from the South African investors. This marked the end of an investment boycott by local businesses. But, Honourable President, my constituency also wants policy certainty, in particular concerning the radical socio-economic transformation. Coming from the 2010 World Cup infrastructure, we know very well that the black industrialists, the SMMEs, didn't participate effectively in creating and maintaining that infrastructure. So what is your government do? What will your government do to ensure that our SMMEs are getting 30% set aside as procurement policies in these various projects? And what is also very important, with the agreement of the Job Summit, what is going to be the role of the civil society, the parliament, and all the stakeholders in ensuring that this noble project find reality and creates more employment? Thank you.
The Honourable, the President.
Honourable Speaker, the setting up of the execution unit that we have spoken about, which will exist alongside of this infrastructure fund, is going to address precisely the issues that Honourable Khatebe is talking about. The extent to which small and medium enterprises and emerging black businesses will participate in infrastructure projects is going to be something that this unit will look at with the eye of a hawk to make sure that, yes, there is set aside for small and medium enterprises and particularly black emerging businesses, that they participate effectively in these projects and that they are not just bystanders. One of the things that clearly we want to focus on is not just the infrastructure build, but it is also infrastructure maintenance. Maintenance is one of the key issues that we need to look at. Yesterday, I had the occasion to go to the Free State and visit a clinic in an area called Heidedal. There is a clinic there and it has existed for a number of years. And as you walk into the clinic, you clearly see that it has not been maintained over many years. And the result of that is we now need to do major repair work over maintenance, small projects that we could have worked on over the number of years. So maintenance is therefore very important. As we build infrastructure, we would like to immediately have a facility that will maintain that infrastructure going forward, because that is a lot cheaper than having to do major overhauls. And this is where small and medium enterprises will play a key role. And we also want, as we said in the stimulus plan, we want to focus on small and medium enterprises in the townships, as well as small and medium enterprises in the rural areas. And the set-asides are going to be so well calibrated that they enable those businesses to get on and succeed. And so therefore, we want to create a number of opportunities, not only for the big companies, but largely for the smaller companies, because it is through smaller companies that we are able to create many more jobs. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Groenewald.
Agbare President, part of the question is to attract investors specifically in the agricultural sector. Now, on an international platform on Bloomberg, you specifically said, and I quote you, "No white farmers are killed in South Africa." Close quote. Now, the official response from your office is that you only reacted to a tweet of President Trump. My vraag is, ongeag of u nou gereageer het op die tweet van president Trump, die werklikheid is, wit boere word in Suid-Afrika wreedaardig vermoor. Dit is dus onwaar om te sê, wit boere word nie vermoor nie. Is die agbare president bereid om daardie families en geliefdes van die wit boere wat in Suid-Afrika vermoor is, vandag om verskoning te vra, omdat u dit gesê het en u dan ook erkenning gee aan daardie leed wat hulle moet ervaar. Want u, Honourable President, you prefer to refer to white farmers. And that is why they are now the subject. I thank you.
The Honourable the President.
Baie dankie. Ek is bereid om te, what is to explain in Afrikaans, om te verduidelik. Ek is bereid om mooi te verduidelik. Want baie mense het nie mooi verstaan wat ek gesê het. I was responding to President Trump's tweet when he said in his tweet, white farmers and white people are being killed. And I said, no, that is not true. And I was specifically referring to that. The fact that, yes, white farmers are being killed, including black people on farms are being killed as well, is the reality that we are living with. So the killings of a number of people in our country is something that concerns me. It should concern all of us. And I will never sort of categorize it as just saying white. It is people in our country are getting killed because I have to be completely non-racial when it comes to this, but I was responding to Trump. But let me then say, I am prepared om te mooi verduidelik to white families who have lost their loved ones. And let me also add that I've been one of those who, as these killings have happened on both sides, I've taken time to phone some families, black and white, and say, I am sorry that this has happened because I see that as my task as president to be a nation builder and not to be parochial in what I do. So, ek sal wel verduidelik, want wat president Trump geskryf het in sy tweet was nie the truth. It was not the truth. There's nie die waarheid nie. Why is my Afrikaans disappearing today? But then again, maybe it's because it's a Tuesday. My Afrikaans is baie mooi on Friday.
The Honourable, sorry.
So that is my answer to that. Thank you.
The Honourable Maimane.
Mr. President, you have gone on public saying your government should not speak with a forked tongue. I think it's important that you speak about decisive action. We need to take decisive action on SOEs. And the one SOE that is putting a serious threat to our fiscus is SAA. SAA are a fiscal risk to us, and they pose a threat to our economy. Now, your finance minister has gone on an international record saying, in fact, we must allow SAA to fail on its own accord. Your public enterprise minister goes on another record saying it requires stabilization and an equity partner. Mr. President, it sounds like this is the very forked tongue you are describing. Now, can you settle with any investor, any South African, what exactly is your government's policy on SAA and set the record straight as it pertains to this fiscal risk to the people of South Africa? What is your policy exactly?
The Honourable, the President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Maimane, I know your policy and approach on SAA is that it should be closed down. That's what you keep saying. Now, here is the real reality. Here's the real reality. SAA is laden with debt right now as we speak. It's laden with debt for a whole number of reasons. It is an enterprise, yes, that's 100% owned by the government, that has been operating in a very difficult sector. And you could say that, but other airlines are doing well. Yes, it is so, but it is especially laden with debt and with its own legacy challenges and problems. Now, here is the problem. If you were to say today that, yes, sell SAA, you would not even be able to get any value for it. You would have to possibly pay somebody to take SAA out of your hands. You would have to pay them quite a number of billions of rands because the debt that we carry and that we have underwritten as government is quite significant. And if we, for instance, were to say, let it be shut down, it basically means that that debt that SAA carries, Honourable Steenhuisen, luister asseblief. Luister asseblief. I don't want to do what I did the other time and say shut up. But anyway.
Madam Speaker.
Honourable, yes, Steenhuisen.
I'm not sure if the upper respiratory tract affected the hearing. I didn't say a word. It was somebody else.
Okay, let it not be a discussion.
Maybe I like you so much. So if we were, for instance, to say shut it down, it basically means that the debt that is in SAA now becomes payable immediately. But immediate payment of that debt immediately has an impact on the debt that is carried by all other state-owned enterprises. And that is how you are then able to even collapse our fiscus. Now, SAA must be seen as our collective challenge and problem. What we have said and what the Minister of Public Enterprises has said, and he was clarifying and maybe, he was actually trying to elaborate more on what the Minister of Finance was saying and saying, in the end, we've got to stabilize SAA. We've got to stabilize it, and the future for an SAA has to be how do we, one, stabilize it, and having stabilized it, how do we carry on with an SAA? And one of the options that we are clearly looking at, amongst many other options, is how we get a strategic equity partner to come and be our partner in SAA as we take it forward. Now, that is the trajectory that we are saying we need to look at. And in fact, some of our state-owned enterprises could well be open for opportunities like that. There is just nothing wrong in saying we can get a strategic equity partner who is well-steeled in terms of finances and who are really good operators who can expand the business opportunities for an SAA to come in and be our partner, and we take SAA forward. Now, rather than shut it down, that is one of the options that we are looking at, and it promises quite a lot for the future stability of SAA, as we stabilize it going forward. Madam Speaker, that is precisely what we are looking at, and I hope Honourable Maimane will begin to change his own approach on our national airline. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Eroding.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, as you mentioned, the mining charter, is that the mining industry, which has the biggest potential for job creation, is currently struggling with low prices and high operating costs, as well as restrictive regulations. Are you not reaching out to the mining industry with the one hand, the stimulus plan, and then take away with the other through your government introducing a regulatory framework that will increase compliance costs for miners and set off temporary boosts that investors needed? Is that not the direct opposite of what were you trying to create through the economic stimulus plan? How can you rectify this?
The Honourable the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It is on the mining charter where I believe that we've done really an excellent job. In terms of the extensive consultation that the Minister Gwede Mantashe has had, he has taken time and the trouble to consult quite widely and consult with key role players in the industry, and even going beyond that. He's consulted with the workers, he's consulted with communities that are around those mines, he's consulted with the mine owners, he's consulted, yes, of course, with government officials, but also consulted with, say, traditional leaders and a whole range of role players. And to a large extent, almost a complete extent, many of those who have been consulted voiced their satisfaction with the mining charter as presented to them and to everyone else. So I don't see the mining charter as being an impediment any longer to further investment in our industry. I see the mining charter as being an enhancer. When we were at the investment summit recently, it was the mine owners, the miners themselves, who came forward to announce billions and billions of rands that they want to invest. Anglo-American, for instance, came forward and said they are prepared to invest up to 70 billion rand in the industry, which demonstrates their confidence, their faith in a growing industry. And they are the ones who have said they see mining as a sunrise industry rather than a sunset industry. Already we are receiving quite a number of inquiries from a number of investors, both local and offshore, who are saying that they want to invest in various mining commodities. So I don't see the mining charter itself as being a constraint to further investment in the industry. And of course, there are other issues that still need to be addressed. For instance, energy is a major challenge to the miners. And that is where we've come up with the issue of administered prices, that certain sectors of our economy do need to be put on the administered prices plane so that we can incentivize them and encourage them to invest and to employ more people. So all those things are being looked at in a creative manner. And the miners themselves were rather grateful for the initiatives that we have taken. And in fact, they've even vocalized it quite a lot, that this mining charter is a great improvement from what we had had in the past, and it therefore enables their boards of directors to vote further investments into the industry. So I think we're going to see lots of investments coming into the mining industry going forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We now come to question number 21, asked by the Honourable Ngwezi. The Honourable the President.
Madam Speaker, violence in schools is a matter of great concern, and it is a matter that calls for cooperation between government, the leadership of schools, the parents, and communities. It is, in the end, a symptom of some of the social problems that continue to confront young people and it is a matter that requires concerted and consistent action by all stakeholders. School-based violence undermines the environment necessary for effective teaching and learning. Our schools, I think all of us will agree, must be places of safety where learners feel and know that they can be safe and secure in an environment that will enhance their learning. In response to these challenges in schools, the South African Police Service and the Department of Basic Education have entered into a protocol on school safety. The purpose of this protocol is to create safe, friendly, and caring learning environments within schools and to promote multi-stakeholder collaboration in the fight against criminal activities in schools. Now, this is an important development that we've had a protocol like this being arrived at. And as a consequence, a number of safety measures have been put in place, including that all schools in the country should be linked to a specific police station, so that if any incident of violence occurs, there should be rapid and quick action from the police station. The South African Police Service has appointed dedicated school safety officers in most areas to serve as liaison officers between the police and the schools. School safety committees have been established, comprising of school management, police, school governing bodies, as well as other relevant stakeholders. The police themselves, in collaboration with various stakeholders, undertake social crime prevention programs that focus on issues such as substance abuse, that also focus on a very prevalent type of activity like bullying, violence prevention, sexual offenses, and cyber-related matters. The majority of pupils that are involved in criminal activities are also affected by social challenges in their communities, such as substance abuse, domestic violence, as well as other crimes. Now, to address these, the Department of Basic Education, as well as the South African Police Service and Social Development and Justice, have convened a School Safety Summit. School safety also featured prominently in the National Youth Crime Prevention Summit held recently this year. These activities provide, as they proceed from the understanding that violence in schools is a social problem which can only be addressed through one, collaboration between government, various stakeholders and communities, and also through a joint problem-solving type of approach. Among these, there are a number of tangible initiatives that are coming out of these collaborative activities. Now, the strategies that are coming out aim to integrate government efforts to prevent youth criminality, including in institutions of learning. Now, all this is being done so that we can end violence in our schools, criminality in our schools, substance abuse in our schools as well. Now, in the end, unless we work together as a society to curb violence in schools and do it as a matter of urgency, we will find it difficult to curb crime and violence in broader society for many years to come. I thank you.
The Honourable Ngwezi.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Thank you, Honourable President, for your response. Honourable President, in the past year, your home province, Limpopo, experienced 942 cases of pupils attacking teachers. Since January last year, Gauteng schools have expelled 151 children, and 31 31 students, learners of those, those who assaulted teachers. In the Western Cape, for example, provincial statistics reveals that over 60 attacks on teachers took place during the first quarter of 2018. And I'm glad that you are saying that there is collaboration that has begun with the SAPS. But my question is that, are you confident, Mr. President, that the collaboration with the SAPS is going to yield to positive results? Because I'm afraid even the tools of trade for SAPS is not enough. If you look at your vehicles that the police uses, it's a disaster. And in some police stations, you'll find that when you report a matter, they will tell you that there is no car. And they will take maybe 20 hours to attend over the matter, and the damage is occurring at school. So are you confident, Mr. President, that this process is going to yield to positive results? Thank you.
The Honourable, the President.
Honourable Speaker, yes, I am confident. I think the measures and the initiatives that are underway are such that they will yield positive results, notwithstanding the challenges that the police continue to have with regard to not having sufficient tools of trade such as vehicles. Now, the collaboration that we are enhancing and we are talking about between all stakeholders in the school environment is very important because it lays a very good foundation to be able also to help us to address these challenges of the lack of tools of trade, vehicles, and what have you. Now, we are beginning to address all this in a focused manner. Recently, a week ago, we launched the anti-gang unit here in the Western Cape, which we are going to spread to other areas as well. We were able to give that anti-gang unit tools of trade such as vehicles so that they should be able to address acts of criminality as and when they happen. Now, this country is quite big and broad. We will be able to spread this out to a number of other areas and make sure that the police do have the tools of trade. Now, it's a budgetary constraint, obviously, but we are working to make sure that safety and lessening criminality in our country becomes something that we focus on. So you ask, am I confident? Yes, I have a high level of confidence, if you care to know. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Maimane.
Mr. President, I think we all agree that the scourge of drug use and related crimes is a ticking time bomb we can't accept. What is factually true is that it was your government, it was the ANC, who decided to shut down these drug units. And I'm glad you finally come around to DA policy and open anti-drug units. I want to congratulate you. But the latest crime stats tell a worrying story. They say that over the past 10 years of ANC government, reported cases of drug use and crimes have almost tripled. Yet conviction rates have decreased. Essentially, from 58% conviction, we're now down to 52% of reported cases ending up with a conviction. In other words, ditsotsi di a tshwariwa, di boela gape go strateng, di tlo go tshwenya bana ba rona. Therefore, Mr. President, what I'd like to know is what is your government going to do to ensure that we increase massively conviction rates in this area in the criminal justice system? Thank you very much.
The Honourable, the President.
Honourable Speaker, I'd like to invite Honourable Maimane to live up to the calling of his faith as a reverend, to have a little bit more faith. Now, we are rolling out a strategy to focus on anti-gangs, to focus on gangs who inevitably don't only get involved in, minor crimes, but get involved in drug trafficking, kidnapping, and all that. We are rolling out this strategy, which you should be pleased about and which you should have faith in. Now, what is that going to result in? That is going to result in more arrests taking place. It's also going to result in the communities themselves having more confidence. And believe you me, Honourable Maimani, I walked the streets of Hanover Park, and I was able to talk to a number of residents, met quite a number of people, men, women, and young people, who, as we were rolling out this strategy, they said, Mr. President, thank you very much. We now have our streets back into our control. We are pleased that now you have given our streets back to our control, and you are now dealing with the criminals and the gangs and what have you. And what that means is more gangs are going to be arrested, gangsters are going to be arrested. We are going to make sure that they get prosecuted. We are going to make sure that they get convicted, and we are going to make sure that they go to jail. Now, having set up the anti-gang unit, have a little faith. Have a little faith as you get involved in your prayers that this is a solution that is going to lead us forward. Now, with this, I have no doubt whatsoever that Minister Kylie and his generals and officers are going to be on top of this, and they are going to make sure that we reduce the level of incidents of criminality in the gang-infested areas, as well as drug peddling and drug selling in those areas. You watch this space, you are going to see changes happening. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker.
On
Madam
what
Speaker,
are you rising, Honourable Steenhuisen?
Madam Speaker, the Honourable Maimani asked a specific question around conviction. The gang unit is not going to be dealing with convictions. They deal with the arrest. That's not the problem. The problem is conviction. The President hasn't answered the question.
Honourable Steenhuisen, please take your seat. Let's proceed to the next supplementary question, and that is Honourable Shaikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Mr. President, I think the problem is bigger than you making it look like, Mr. President. You're not taking into consideration the contributing factors to the crime. If you take particularly the Western Cape and the special planning, if you look at the issue of the housing in the Western Cape, if you look at the fact that there's no water and sanitation, there is no roads even for the police to go into to be able to go and deal with the crime. The drug and substance abuse, knowing that alcohol was one of the most serious contributing factors to crime and murder in the Western Cape, the DI government is now introducing the sale of alcohol in the schools. Taking all that into consideration, do you not believe we need a more holistic approach to deal with all the socio-economic conflict, all the relevant departments together to be able to establish how we're going to work to reduce crime, because the police on their own cannot deal with the problem? Thank you.
The Honourable, the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. What I think Honourable Shaikh is saying is that this is a much broader problem. We should never deal with it on a one-dimensional basis. We should deal with the other accompanying societal challenges that we have. And some of those have to do precisely with what he has articulated, the issues of poverty, the issues of unemployment, and issues of a number of people not having adequate housing and not even having the requisite facilities in their homes, water and sanitation, and not even enough roads even for where the police can go. So that is really what is at the core of this. And having been to Hanover Park and having exchanged thoughts and views with a number of people there, one can see that the societal challenges and problems that our people are living under is quite immense. And the other one that I saw acutely is that many young people drop out of school. They drop out of school after possibly 9 years of schooling, and then they become susceptible to getting involved in acts of criminality, and they become victims. But let alone those who become direct victims as a result of being shot at when they are either going to school. I met a young woman who said she is terrified of going to school because she could be either kidnapped and raped, she could also be shot at. So those are the broader societal issues. And the real good approach is that we should look at this as a joint problem. It is a problem for all of us rather than grandstanding, standing on platforms pointing fingers. And that's precisely what we were seeking to promote in Hanover Park. And the community of Hanover Park embraced this type of approach, where they said they are prepared to work with police, they are prepared to work with all other role players to have a collaborative approach to reducing the levels of criminality, levels of gangsterism in their area. Now, one can sit here and stand here in Parliament and point fingers and pontificate. That is not going to be the solution. The real solution is that we as role players must work together. We must work together and walk those areas so that we can get to understand the needs of our people, as one did when we went through Hanover Park. And the police are now amongst the people, they are living amongst the people, and they are helping to reduce the levels of criminality amongst the people. What we need to be doing at national government, provincial government, and local government is to actually embark on programs and initiatives that are going to reduce the temptation for our people to get involved in all this. Provide proper housing, proper sanitation, proper water, so that people can have their dignity back, because this is eroding their dignity in many ways. So I agree with you, Honourable Shaikh. We need to have a multi-dimensional type of approach to this, and thank you for that.
The Honourable Mkalipi.
Speaker,
You're not Mkalipi.
in terms of some rule, can I take this question?
Please do.
Thank you. Honorable President, you know, this phone doesn't have a camera. You might want to start ordering it for cabinet members, because it will save us a lot from some of the embarrassing activities. It doesn't have a camera, it can't even be hacked, this phone. Can I come maybe give it to you after, so you can have a model of what phones might be critical for honorable cabinet members? And anyway, I'm very worried about the criminalization of the youth and the children. The fundamental question here is, what kind of a society loses control on its children?
Yeah.
When they go into criminal activities, when they go into gang activities, what kind of a society sends police into students? It's a society that has lost the responsibility to educate those students. It's a society that has lost the power to prepare a future for this youth. So why don't we diagnose the problem properly? Because it's not one or two students that are stabbing each other. It's a phenomenon of gangs, of drug and alcohol abuse, signifying the failures of the last 24 years to properly run a society. Why should we be sending police to children? Why don't we send social workers? Why don't we create jobs for them? Why don't we give them proper qualified teachers who are going to keep them interested in education and not getting into drugs and alcohol abuse? I think it's a shame that our solution is to criminalize those kids.
Honourable Member.
Speaker, On a point of order, there's an incident which earlier on when the Honourable Ndlozi was speaking, the Minister of Home Affairs was doing this. It looks like he's bringing his ponster activities here in Parliament. Must not allow that here. Must not
Honourable
allow ponsters
Shibambu,
to
that's
come
not a point
and
of
play with
order.
wrong things here. Please.
Honourable President.
On a point of order, Madam Speaker.
Honourable.
Yes, Madam Speaker. May you please rule that the conduct of Minister Lindiwe by doing this pinky signal is very unparliamentary in view of the issue of the camera and the mouth issues. Thank you. Children are watching these proceedings, and for her to be doing like this, it's a very, very
We will
unparliamentary.
deal with that issue later. Right now, I'd like to ask the Honourable the President to respond to the supplementary question by Honourable Ndlozi. Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Let me immediately say, and this might surprise Honourable Dr. Ndlozi, that I agree with him. We should desist from criminalizing our children. We should rather...
Speaker, I want to check if the President agrees on the phone or what.
No, Honourable Malema, please. Please proceed, Honourable President.
I agree with Honourable Dr. Ndlozi on the issue that he raises about not criminalizing our children and looking at this problem as a societal one, and look at it more broadly as a problem that has to do with the society that we seek to build. And this is really the core of the problem. We need to ask ourselves, what type of society are we trying to engender and to build when our children are drawn into all these activities of violence? But more importantly for me, Honourable Ndlozi, is the role that we all have as parents. Because this is not a matter where, yes, after 24 years, we start pointing fingers at each other. Because the issue also is what happens at the base, at the foundation of the process of building that society, and it is in the home. It is our role as parents. What do we do with the children that Providence has given us to bring up? We bring them into this world, and how do we bring them up? Because that is where the real challenge is. And I saw it for myself, not only in Hanover Park, but all over as you go through the length and the breadth of the country. You actually see the lack of real commitment amongst us as parents. So, Honourable Ndlozi, we should not be pointing fingers. I don't know where you were pointing your finger, either to the left or to the right, but we should remember that on this one, as you point one finger, all the three fingers are pointing at you, all of us. And if we say we should be ashamed, it should be all of us ought to be ashamed that we have children who either behave in that way in schools, but also children who drop out of school. As I spoke to a number of young people in Hanover Park, I found that easily more than 50% of those children I spoke to have dropped out of school after 9 years of schooling, and they are now just roaming around. It was broad morning when we were there, and I kept asking, why are you not at school? They've dropped out, and they're now susceptible to being drawn in by gangsters, but also in the schools themselves. As you say, we shouldn't criminalize our children. We should, yes, roll out more social workers. We should roll out more community workers, and they should be the ones who go amongst our children rather than the police. The police in the end, yes, they are almost the last line, acting as a preventative team that should be looking after society when the wheels come off. We as parents must make sure that we play our role to bring up children, and that is the type of society that we should build. And it is our collective responsibility. Honourable Rosy, it is your responsibility as much as it is mine to make sure that our children are well brought up and we ensure that they are not susceptible to violence in schools and drugs and what have you. So let us do the right thing as parents of our children in South Africa. Thank you very much.
We now come to question number 22, asked by the Honourable Olomisa. The Honourable the President.
Honourable Speaker, there are several reasons for community protests, ranging from local service delivery failures to broader concerns about issues of crime, municipal demarcation and corruption, and failure of governance. Many of these protests, both those that are peaceful and some of those that tend to be violent, reflect the severe weaknesses in our governance structures at local level. They also reflect poor consultation processes with communities and a perceived distance between communities and their public representatives at all levels. It is necessary to address the causes of these protests in a holistic and in an integrated manner. That is why national government is working with provincial and local governments to improve the delivery of services, to build and maintain municipal infrastructure, and to strengthen financial and other governance areas. Now, if we focus on the stimulus and economic recovery plan, you will have noted that a section of that deals with what we have to do in local government. Minister Mkhize is busy with all that now, having identified in a number of municipalities in our country where, for instance, protests have been taking place, what interventions we need to embark upon. And quite a lot of resources have been laid out to do precisely that. Now, to ensure that there is a systematic response to causes of protest, the government has established the Interministerial Task Team on Service Delivery, Integration and Alignment. And it includes a number of ministries that have to do with issues of that impact on local government. And this team has adopted an approach to enhance integrated planning as well as budgeting. And we are going to be focusing on 8 metropolitan municipalities, 43 local municipalities, and 6 priority district municipalities. Now, together, these municipalities account for over 87% of all households living in informal settlements and backyard villages. They also constitute over half of all service delivery backlogs and have the greatest number of recorded service delivery protests. We've already identified and isolated where all these are happening, and we are now coming up with clear interventions that are going to address these. Now, a set of strategies and action plans are being developed, focused on the short, medium, and long-term interventions in 57 pilot municipalities, as outlined in the Stimulus and Economic Recovery Plan. The work of the team that has been set up is supported by a program of management office located in MISA, the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agency, and this office is going to draw quite a number of other key technical people from a number of professional engineers and planners. It is necessary to ensure that the intergovernmental alignment, since the issues at hand cut across national, provincial, and various local competencies, that it is there. And at the same time, it is necessary for public representatives, including MPs and ministers, to engage with communities on an ongoing basis to ensure that these needs, as well as the concerns of our people at that local level, are addressed. Because as I alluded to earlier, these protests happen not because our people are mad, they happen because there is system failure in regard to consultation about a whole variety of matters, but there's also a failure of governance. And our people respond to these because they are finding that their hopes are dashed and their aspirations are just waylaid. Now, we need to address these so that we properly and positively address the needs of our people. We are embarking on this process, Honourable Holomisa, and we will do it with good effect because we have already identified what the real key problem is. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
The Honourable Holomisa.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your response. I have often noticed that the Honourable Minister of Police, Becky, is singularly visible as a public representative when violent protests occur. I would like to know, notwithstanding what you have just said to us in this house, why kusoloko kunguye yedwa angahambi ne-Minister of Water Affairs, i-Minister ye-Housing? Why is Behlele's office in kunguye yedwa lo? So we would like to see to it that they accompany him. Kunga address only issues like protest and violence, but to address the issues is bakhalangazo. Because
So awunambuzo, Hlekazi.
Ngosi.
The Honourable, the President, you might want to just comment.
Yes, Honourable Speaker, let me thank Honourable Holomisa for that observation. Let me thank Honourable Holomisa for really raising this matter and immediately say to him, Honourable Holomisa, the issue that you're articulating is a matter that we have been addressing, and we've decided that as we respond through this interministerial task team that I spoke about, as we respond to some of these challenges, we need to get government leaders to be out there amongst the people addressing these problems. And once we know that it is a housing problem, we should get, yes, the Minister of Housing or Deputy Minister being out there, including if it impacts on sanitation or water, they must be out there. And yes, we should not only look at it from a policing point of view, we should look at it more broadly. And Minister Kylie has been very active in this regard, which I'm glad you have noticed. But similarly, other ministers have been also busy with a whole range of other things, and we are now going to be adding various government leaders, ministers, to be able to deal with all these challenges and problems. But once again, thank you very much. It is a most positive intervention. Diabulela, General Wam, Diabulela.
Speaker, can I check quickly?
No, Honourable
Please, Speaker,
Malema.
it's very urgent. Do we have a Minister of Housing? Do we really have a Minister of Housing?
Honourable Malema, please take your seat. The Honourable Maimane.
Mr. President, I think we can all agree, rail, especially for our people, still remains the most affordable form of public transport, especially now that petrol has gone through the roof under your government. And I think what we are discovering is that it's actually been held hostage by a few people who have arson attacks, they are burning our trains, and commuters are left. The great difficulty is that recently my colleagues went and engaged the community here in Mitchell's Plain train station. They waited there for an hour. The train never arrived. In fact, the community came back and said, this is becoming like a ghost station. Our people are desperate to find work and they don't have public transport that helps them. I think, Mr. President, as a suggestion, is it not about time your government actually agrees with the DA that we should take the functions and the infrastructure budget of the national road and devolve them down so that metros who are capable to do that function can run them? So we integrate transport and make sure our people can get to work. Please, is it not time that we do that, Mr. President?
The Honourable, the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Maimani, you know, we are busy with a whole range of things. And crafting an integrated transport system is one of those things that we need to work on, because the legacy that we got from apartheid is so horrible in the way that our transport system was calibrated. It was calibrated in the typical apartheid way, where the issue of spatial development just poisoned everything in the way that our people were relegated to faraway places. So right now, the country is working on an integrated transport system. And as we do so, I would welcome your thoughts and your proposals in terms of how best we do it. Now, you may think that it's best to do it at the metro level. You may think that it's best to do it at a local level, but it is a matter that all of us needs to put our heads around, but particularly to deal with the issue of the spatial landscape of our country, how our people have been accommodated over the many years of apartheid misrule, and the impact that it has today in moving our people around. Yes, through trains, through buses, through taxis, all this needs to be looked at in a broader way. So the time arrives for this when we have a much broader integrated transport system. And then I will welcome your views as far as that is concerned. Now, let's come to the issue of the trains. The issue of the trains, yes, is a challenge. It is a challenge from a criminal prevention type of viewpoint, and the Minister of Police is dealing with that. Those gangs and those individuals and those people who are targeting trains, particularly here in the Western Cape, who are burning our trains, who are destroying our trains, that is a burning platform that we need to attend to, and we are attending to it right now as we speak. And in the end, the efficacy of the service that is then deployed by PRASA in terms of getting trains to arrive on time, to be able to transport our people, is a second issue that needs to be addressed. Now, you will have heard that, yes, as you know, the unfortunate thing is that our trains are being burnt, but PRASA is rolling out more trains that need to be brought to bear into our train transport system. And we now have a factory in South Africa as we are reigniting the manufacturing base of our country that is now making South African-made trains. Trains are now being made here in South Africa. And we are now going to, as we craft this integrated transport system, we are going to be making trains. You may be interested, Honourable Maimani, to know that, you know, the AU has declared that as South Africa, and you may want to have a conversation with Minister Nzimande about this, the AU has said that South Africa should be the country that manufactures trains for the rest of Africa, giving great faith in our transport system in the way that we calibrate it. So we will be calibrating an integrated transport system which will include rail, bus, taxis, and vehicles. So we will, yes, welcome your views, whether they are DA views or your own views, bring them into the pot. So let's look at how we finalize an integrated transport system. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
The
let's
Honourable
have some.
Ngwezi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Mr. President, thank you very much for the response and for the question from Mr. Olomisa. Mr. President, the one main challenge that exists is that our government officials are sort of arrogant. They don't quickly respond on demands by communities. And communities have realized now that if you are looking for a clinic, you must ban the school. And what is it that exactly, as President of the state, you are going to do to quickly address the issue of consultation between government and officials? And also, are you not considering giving more funding to municipalities? Because my belief is that all development is local. And the easiest or the quickest way where people can communicate closely with government is through local government. Thank you.
The Honourable, the President.
Honourable Speaker, the issue of consultation, as I said in my main reply to the question, is key in all this. We need to deepen and broaden consultation, but we also need to inculcate a culture of real batupeli. We must put our people first as we interact with them. In the way of consultation, in the way of providing services to them, and in the way of getting them involved in developmental processes. So batupeli as a concept, as a philosophy, is a very important one. And we keep on harping on this with our civil servants and saying that treat our people as your customers, and the customer is always right. Make sure that you consult our people and make sure that they buy into the processes that we are involved in. But in this regard, we also rely on our public representatives. That is why we have public representatives at local level, at ward level. Those public representatives are the front line for us, not so much government officials, but public representatives are the ones who have been chosen by our people, the community, to represent their views and their aspirations. So that is where we need to entrench this culture of proper consultation. At the same time, clearly, our local government structures need to be capacitated. And capacitating them means that they need to have sufficient resources, but they also know that they need to, one, look after the resources that they have and not waste them and not spend them in a reckless manner, but they also need to raise resources so that they are able to deliver services amongst our people. So yes, our municipalities are facing serious challenges because quite a number of them don't even have a tax base. They rely on grants from government. And government is looking at the full architecture of our municipalities to see how best we can resolve some of the challenges that they continue to have. But in the end, it is consultation, consultation, and consultation that is going to provide much easier answers as we provide services to our people. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Shivambu.
No, thank you, Speaker. The President, I think you are beginning to acknowledge the perennial incapacity of the local state to deliver services. Yes, they designed that. The division of revenue processes only allocates less than 10% of the overall revenue of the state to the local state. And majority of municipalities expend more than 80% of their budgets on salaries and operational expenses.
Yeah.
In the medium-term policy statement, the Minister of Finance said that 113 municipalities have got unfunded, have adopted unfunded budgets. Don't you think that the whole design of the division of revenue process and the manner in which municipalities are structured is fundamentally flawed? We need a different, because it will never happen that the municipalities in the current design will have the capacity to deliver basic services to our people. Don't you think we need to rebase the whole structure in terms of the current structure of municipalities? Thank you very much.
The Honourable, the President.
Honourable Speaker and Honourable Shibambu, when I spoke about the architecture of our local government system, it also touches on things like that, because it is a matter of concern and must be a matter of concern to us that a number of municipalities find themselves without a proper revenue base. They are not able to raise any revenue, and therefore, in the end, they will just forever depend on the grants that they get from national government. And as you correctly say, you know, the division of revenue is such that they only get a small portion of the overall revenue. And therefore, we need to have conversations about how best we address the problem, but more importantly, the challenges that many of our municipalities have. What we also need to do is to look at a whole number of things. For instance, we need to look at what the Auditor General is also saying, because where they actually have the resources, a number of municipalities are misspending those resources. Much as, yes, they are spending quite a huge percentage on salaries, but at the same time, what should be going towards capital investment is getting wasted and is getting misspent. So we need to address and find a way of dealing with that, while at the same time look at the broader issue of the full architecture of municipal funding. And that is a process that we need to embark on. And in fact, through a Minister of Local Government and Cooperative Governance, we are looking at precisely that, because we cannot carry on with a system that relegates a number of our municipalities to being completely unfunded in a number of their own activities. So if there are any wise ideas, Honourable Shibambu, we will welcome that. Thank you very much.
We now move to question number 23, asked by Honourable Bjorkman. The Honourable, the President.
Honourable Speaker, South Africa will become a member of the United Nations Security Council in the non-permanent member category for the third time in the term 2019 to 2020. Now, this is where we have to give a great deal of gratitude to many countries around the world who supported South Africa's bid to become a member of the Security Council. But more importantly, also give a great deal of gratitude to our ambassadors who are strewn all over the world, who worked ceaselessly and campaigned to get South Africa to be elected. And also our Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and especially our Minister of International Relations, Minister Sisulu as well. So they worked very hard to get South Africa to be re-elected to this important seat. Now, what we will do, we will use our term on the Security Council to advance President Nelson Mandela's legacy by focusing on conflict prevention and mediation. We will seek to bring together divergent perspectives and also seek to resolve impasses which undermine the ability of the Security Council to act where needed. A number of countries are looking forward to South Africa's tenure on the Security Council because they expect that we will be bringing in wide experience in the matters of conflict resolution and prevention. So this, they believe, will stand the Council in good stead. And our presence on the Council presents an opportunity to work with other African countries that are serving on the Council, particularly Equatorial Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire, to promote peace and stability on the continent. Now, South Africa will build on its own experience in conflict resolution, as well as mediation, and work closely with permanent and elected members to fulfill the Council's mandate of maintaining international peace and security. In addition to country-specific conflict situations, serving on the Council will also provide us with an opportunity to place emphasis on the importance of women in peace and security operations. We will emphasize the need to work within and through multilateral institutions to advance post-conflict reconstruction and development and to promote the peaceful resolution of conflicts. The current global environment is characterized by various threats to international peace and security, continued poverty and underdevelopment, the displacement of populations as well. Because most of these challenges are transnational in nature, they require collective action, which is what we will be advocating. Even the most powerful states should not achieve security nor maintain prosperity and health for their people by acting unilaterally or in isolation on their own. South Africa will continue to advocate multilateralism as a key aspect of international relations, and that collective action is required at all times to mitigate the risks of global development, governance, and security. Now, we obviously advocate and support a rules-based international system that fosters greater interdependence and mutual cooperation in the way in which we can successfully address conflicts and difficulties that many countries have. So we see the Security Council as the main body that is mandated with the responsibility to maintain international peace and security. So South Africa will therefore use its position on the UN Security Council to collectively work with others to promote a more equitable and a more inclusive global order which promotes peace and security for all in the world. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Björkman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the response, Honourable President. In a statement after your recent talks with the German Chancellor, Ms. Angela Merkel, both South Africa and Germany indicated that they will work closely at the Security Council of the UN to ensure that the Security Council contributes meaningfully to resolve important questions on international peace and security. Now, Mr. President, more than 60% of the issues currently on the agenda of the Security Council is from the continent of Africa. How do you see can we collaborate with our fellow African Union members on the Council, but also the members of the BRICS countries and the G20 on the Security Council to promote an agenda of international peace and security that promotes inclusivity and multilateralism rather than unilateralism? I thank you.
The Honourable, the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. We are fortunate in that we belong to the BRICS club, if you like. We also are part of the African Union and will be collaborating with 2 other countries on the UN Security Council. And the orientation of these 3 entities is very similar to ours, where we will be working together to cooperate and collaborate on promoting peace and security, not only on the African continent, but also in the world. At the BRICS level, during the BRICS summit that was held here, we were very clear collectively as the 5 countries in declaring that we believe in multilateralism and that we are irrevocably interdependent as countries, but more importantly, that countries in the world should consider themselves being interdependent. And the same obtains for the African Union. And as we work with other African countries, that's what we will be promoting. Clearly, at the G20 level, and particularly at the summit that is going to be held in Argentina in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will be taking that message forward to promote a perspective that says that we need to act in a multilateral manner, and there should be no country that will act on a unilateral basis on its own to try and have an overbearing influence in the world. So we believe that our word and the influence that we will collectively have with other countries is going to strengthen multilateralism, even if it goes against the grain of what other countries and players believe. And we will want to spread this message to ensure that it is embraced and it is owned by all, and it brings to bear an influence, particularly in relation to addressing challenges of security and peace, not only on our continent, but all over. So we will be carrying and taking that message forward, even as we work with Equatorial Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire on the UN Security Council from the perspective of Africa. But we also have other countries who share our perspective, who are also non-permanent members on the Security Council. So we will be pushing exactly the same message with them. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
The Honourable Shengwa.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Mr. President, as South Africa joins the UN Security Council, as we've said for the 3rd time, one of the globally unresolved questions is that of Israel and Palestine. And of course, it's become a global perennial headache and it needs a speedy resolution. And while subscribing to this 2-state solution and the outlook of the South African government, what is of concern, of course, Mr. President, is that the ANC and its government are speaking at opposite ends. And one of the threats which is looming now is the downgrading of the South African embassy in Israel into a liaison office. So, Mr. President, can you clarify so that we will know exactly what it is that will be South Africa's position on that body, so that we do not contradict ourselves on the global stage and utter something else on the domestic front? So as things stand now and moving forward, what is the South African position insofar as the Israeli-Palestine question is concerned? And secondly, with regards to the embassy, what is that position? Because at some point, the Minister of International Relations was going to make a statement in this House, and that was postponed. And of course, that continues to create uncertainty in that regard. Thank you.
The Honourable the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Our position as a government in relation to the Palestine-Israeli question is that we are firmly in support of a 2-state solution and a concept that is broadly supported by many players around the world. And we are also in firm support of the peaceful resolution of that conflict. And we, as the ruling party, has taken a decision that the embassy should be downgraded. We're working on that to see how best that is going to be put into practice. But may I say at the same time, one of the number of role players have been saying to us that South Africa does have a role to play in fostering peace between Israel and Palestine. And this has also been clearly vocalized by people on the Palestinian side. So as we proceed to see how this resolution that was taken by the governing party is to be implemented. We continue to say that the conflict in that basin of the world must be properly resolved, and we are saying that as South Africa, we're quite happy and pleased to play whatever role that we may be able to play to ensure that the conflict is peacefully resolved. So we are open to playing that type of role, but at the same time, we have taken a very clear position. And the position has been born out of the deep problems that the Palestinians have been going through themselves. And as a governing party, we've been, as it is well known, been acting in solidarity with the Palestinians, and we've been saying we support their struggle, and obviously, within the broad parameters of supporting that struggle, we are also saying that conflict needs to be resolved peacefully, and it needs to be resolved as a two-state type of solution, which is, as I said, broadly accepted. So all these matters can be taken forward in tandem as we address the situation in full. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Malema.
Thank you very much, President. My question is based on the trade embargo imposed on Cuba by the US. You will know that the UN voted that the embargo must be lifted, and only 2 countries voted against. And the US will use its veto powers to overrule that decision, and as a result, it will not be implemented. Don't you think that we need to do away with these veto powers by other countries? Meaning, maybe we should restructure the UN, and the inability to restructure the UN, we might have to consider identifying the progressive forces in the UN and establish an alternative to the UN, because we cannot be subjected to a permanent undemocratic practices which overrule the majority all the time when the superpowers do not have their way. The other thing, President, is that don't you think we should maximize our trade?
Sadly, your
with
time has
Cuba?
expired, Honourable Malema.
An establishment of solidarity fund, maybe with Cuba like the Nigerians did. Don't say sit down, you never ask questions. Even your children know that you are useless, you don't ask questions.
Order, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, point of order.
Who's raising a point of order?
Honourable Speaker, in terms of...
Oh, okay.
Thank you. In terms of Rule 142, other than the time that the honourable member had exhausted, but also that the follow-up question should be restricted or limited to 1 question.
Yes, that's
but
true.
however, Honourable Speaker, I would also like you to rule, if it's parliamentary, for the honourable member to say, we must shut up, we never ask questions. Is it really, we are useless, like he said. Hansard can then confirm the exact word. Thank you.
Honourable Malema shouldn't say another honourable member must shut up because he never asks questions.
No, Speaker, they were saying I must shut up.
Oh.
You ruled that I must sit down, and I continued. And then someone said, shut up. And I said, in answering that person, don't say Ubani because it's not you.
Okay, take
so
a seat
I
now.
answered, maybe someone from the gallery there. Why is this one jumping saying it's unparliamentary? You don't know who I'm talking to. Stop being chacharahwe.
Honourable Malema, please let's allow the President to answer the question. Honourable President. Order, Honourable.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Honourable God, please sit down.
The member there who's being called to order is also doing this gesture of pinky to us here.
Please just take a seat. Honourable President.
Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker. I'm here. Honourable Speaker, I'm here. I'm sitting here listening to the president, and people are talking about my name.
I didn't hear anybody talk about your name. Honorable President, I think honorable members are getting tired. They start being like this when they are getting tired. Honorable President, please answer.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. Clearly, the issue of the embargo against Cuba is a matter of concern to all of us, and we continue to be dismayed that instead of having the embargo lifted, there's one country that continues to insist that that embargo should continue, whilst the people of Cuba continue to suffer. So we are in full support that the embargo should be lifted, and it should be done with immediate effect. In relation to the United Nations itself, we are on the side of those who say that, and we advocate this, that the United Nations Security Council should be reformed. We need reforms because we cannot have a situation from the inception of the United Nations in the 40s where only 5 countries in the whole world have a veto on decisions that need to be taken. And Honourable Malema, we are continuing to put that message across, and we are actually getting a lot of support from around the world, as particularly from the African point of view. None of our countries on this huge continent that represents well over 1 billion people is represented on the UN Security Council. And we think that is gross unfairness which is imposed on the people of Africa, that we are not able to participate in the highest decision-making echelon of the United Nations. Honourable Malema, before we even veer into the direction of saying set up another entity, which we don't support because we believe that the United Nations is the one body that has the capability, it has the gravitas, it enjoys the confidence of people around the world. It is that body that we must reform. I think we should not try and set up other bodies, another body which in the end will just be a faction or a splinter group. Let us work inside the United Nations, reform the United Nations. Our message is gaining traction. And firstly, we want, 1, that there should be agreement that it will be reformed, and 2, we should have other countries, particularly our continent, that is not represented on the UN Security Council, be represented. And thereafter, we can then look at which of the countries on the African continent are best placed to be able to represent the continent as a whole. And as you can well expect, we also have our own thoughts and views on this matter, but that should come later once the idea has been embraced that there should be reform of the UN Security Council. Now, we've raised it with the Secretary General of the UN. We've also raised it with a number of members of who are permanent members, and clearly there seems to be, a real issue here because they are already inside the pact of those 5 security members. They may not see the need to reform, but we are continuing to advocate that there should indeed be a reform, because we cannot continue living in a multilateral organization that represents the people of the world, more than 6 billion people, and in the end, it is only 5 members who have a veto on the decisions that have to be taken. So I say, tarry a little bit. Don't rush too much to say, establish another United Nations. Let us reform this United Nations, because I think it is possible that we will be able to reach our objective in this regard. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I would allow Honourable Maimane.
Thank you, Madam House Chair. Mr. President, I recently hosted 2 MPs from Venezuela. And Venezuela as a nation is stuck in a plague where, in fact, it's about collapse. It's described as a failed state. These MPs are exiled from their country of their birth, mainly because Venezuela adopted very radical populist ideas. Isn't it about time, Mr. President, that in the next 2 years, as South Africa has a crucial role on the UN Security Council, that we as a country part our way from these dictators who have risen up, who are in fact oppressing people as we speak right now, as Venezuela stands. And when you look at South Africa's own voting patterns, they've been supporting of these dictators. Can I ask you, Mr. President, let's take a stance to depart from radical populists and begin to actually establish the rule of law and democracy in Venezuela. Thank you very much.
Honourable President.
Madam Chair, we obviously, our tenure on the Security Council is going to be underpinned.
Let's allow the President to respond.
Is going to be underpinned by advancing our own values, values that are enshrined in our Constitution, but also we are also going to be advancing the values that are enshrined in the African Union's Constitutive Act and the general decisions that are also taken by the African Union. That is what is really going to be guiding us as we sit on the Security Council. And obviously we will seek to be acting in the interests of the people of the world. What advances their interests is what will be prominent in our minds. Now, Mr. Maimane, we are not in the business of saying, you we will not associate with, you we will associate with, you we don't love, you we love, and all that. We act on a principled basis and not act on the basis that you are trying to box us into. We are an organization that is principled, and that is what we are going to be taking to the United Nations. Thank you very much.
Order, honourable members. Thank you, President. We now move to question 24, which has been asked by Honourable Reverend K.R.J. Mishre. President.
Honourable Chair, House Chair, as I indicated in the National Council of Provinces in September, there are no specific conditions that, with regard to the loan that Eskom received from the China Development Bank. The loan is guaranteed by government under the existing government guarantee framework agreement. No amendment or conditions were written into the government guarantee framework for the purpose of this loan. As I said, and as I indicated in the NCOP, no Eskom assets have been used as security for the loan, and the China Development Bank is not entitled to any direct or indirect ownership of Eskom assets. The same conditions that are applicable on all government guarantee facilities are applicable to the China Development Bank facility. I thank you.
Thank you, President. Honourable Mishra.
Thank you, President, for that reply. While you have assured the nation, even today, that no Eskom asset was used as guarantee of the loan, what the President did not mention is what would happen if Eskom does fail to observe its obligations and the default on the repayments. Now, my question, Mr. President, is, looking at Eskom's track record, they have failed on a number of occasions. So what will happen if ESCOM does default? Will the President assure the nation that not a single South African asset, including land, will be used as an assurance to the Chinese government that if ESCOM does fail, it will not be attached? Can we get that assurance that nothing, not only ESCOM, but South African assets would be attached if ESCOM defaulter on their repayments? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. President.
Honourable House Chair, Honourable Meshwe, we are not in the business of entering into agreements and knowing that we will default on those agreements. We abide by the terms of the agreements that we enter into, and ESCOM has not failed to live up to the payments that it should live up to when it comes to repaying loans. And we do not intend to have ESCOM in the end defaulting on the agreements that it has entered into. And I have specifically said, if you listened very carefully, Reverend, that as we entered into this loan, there is no security in the form of assets, a portion of ESCOM, indirectly or directly, that has been offered as security. We have not done that. Now, the guarantee that has been given is part of the broad general guarantee framework that we give as we underpin the loan processes that any state-owned enterprise has. It could be Transnet, it could be Sunral, it could be, Umgeni Water, it could be anyone. In the end, the government is the one that is the backstop. It is the backstop to all these loan processes, and it is not a specific asset. And I'd like to give you assurance when it comes to that. That is how these guarantees work. A general government guarantee framework agreement works in that way. It is a broad pot of guarantees that is given by government, because in the end, it is the sovereign, it is the government in the end that is seen as the backstop. And we don't give specific assets. We don't even give, people, we don't even give land, we don't even give vehicles or anything as a guarantee, because in the end, for the loan providers, that is worthless. That is worthless. What is more worthy for them is the government guarantee. It is the sovereign guarantee that people place more emphasis on. So if you have read that in other countries, loan providers have gone after certain assets, I can assure you that it is not going to happen here. We will not allow that to happen. In fact, Reverend, you credit us with a level of wisdom that as we negotiate these agreements, we are not going to sell the family or the country silver. We are not going to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Honourable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Thank you for your answer, Mr. President. But given the flip-flopping record of your government, sell SSA, don't sell SAA, oppose the DA's court application this morning, withdraw the opposition in the afternoon, it's hard to take these assurances seriously. The 33 billion rand loan from China Development Corporation poses a significant risk to the South African fiscus and to our citizens. And that's why during the last question session, we asked you to make a full disclosure on what the terms and conditions were of the secretive loan. After Eskom, through our PIA, initially refused to grant this request, they then gave us some information, but left out all the important information that would need to show transparency and accountability here. Now, this tactic is only all too familiar. It's precisely the secrecy and lack of transparency that provided the fertile ground for state capture to take root in South Africa. We will approach the courts if necessary, but Mr. President, in the interest of openness and transparency, in breaking the secrecy and subterfuge of the last 8 years, will you commit today to make these terms and conditions public
Honourable
so the South African people
your time
can
is
see it?
up. Honourable President.
Now, let me say, Honourable House Chair, let me say I want to reject the notion that this loan that has been provided to ESCOM is going to provide an overbearing risk in the way that you describe it on the sovereign. This loan is no different, yes, it is no different from the loan that Sanral has. It's no different from the loan that Transnet has. It's no different than the loan that all our state-owned enterprises have, including SAA as well. Because you may ooh and ah and all that, because in the end, all these happen under the broad government guarantee framework agreement. We have not entered into any special deal with the Bank of China when it comes to this. It is a straightforward vanilla type of loan that is guaranteed by the sovereign, and that's what it is. And it is no different whatsoever from all others. So I want to say very clearly to you, and there's a problem, House Chair. There's a problem, House Chair, of honourable members, and particularly Steenhuisen, to have the ability to listen, because it does seem that he's a bit handicapped when it comes to that. He cannot listen, and even as one tries to give him an explanation, there seems to be a serious handicap. I would immediately have said maybe he needs to go for an audio testing, but maybe that is not his only problem. There is a deeper problem, which maybe we need to have some analysts to look into, because he's not listening, and maybe it's a problem of properly assimilating the information that he is given. So I think we have a problem with Honourable Steenhuisen. But I've given him the answer. Maybe overnight he'll be able to spend time and be able to assimilate properly the information that has been put before him. Thank you, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you, President. Honourable Steenhuisen, you have stood up.
Madam Speaker, Madam House Chair, I'm very glad that the President is very concerned about my health.
Is it a point of order?
Yes, it is a point of order. Because you cannot cast
Point of order, Comrade
Honourable
Togo.
Rosy.
Why is he rising? On which rule? On which rule? Can you have consistency, Honourable Chair?
To quote,
don't be intimidated by anyone. Don't be intimidated by anyone.
Honourable Ndlozi, I'm glad you have taken your seat, because indeed you raised the point of order. I said I'll come back to you, but you then also did what is wrong. Continue to express yourself. Honourable Steenhuisen stood up on a point of order. I'm still listening to him. Can you please take your seat? Honourable Ndlozi, I asked, wait, 8. Honourable Steenhuisen, what's your point of order?
Well, to quote the Honourable Ndlozi from earlier, some rule. That's what he got away with earlier.
Okay,
but
what's some
nonetheless,
rule?
to say that it is, the President, I thank him for his concern about my auditory abilities and the like. However, I don't think that it's appropriate.
Honourable Chair, please.
Can the
Please.
VBS Bank looters please give me a chance?
No, you are not going to call me a VBS looter, you racist young white man. A racist young man was accused of rape, of bone.
Order, honorable members. Honorable members. Order, honorable members. Honorable members of the DA and the EFF. Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members.
House Chairperson.
Honorable members.
House Chairperson.
Honorable Shibambo, I'll listen to you. Can you
Chairperson,
please
on-
ask
on
your
a point of
members?
order.
Order. Can the sergeant in arms come in? Order, honorable members.
On a point of order.
Order. Sergeant at arms, can you please come
On a point
in?
of order.
Order, honorable members. Sergeant at arms, can you please act? Honorable Kadi, Honorable Shibambo, can you please ask the members to take their seats? Yes, can you please first ask them to take their seats? Honorable Stenhazen, as a chief whip, can you please also ask your members to take their seats? Can you please ask your members to take their seats? Honorable Shibambo, Honorable Shibambo, Honorable Shibambo, can you please ask your members too to take their seats? Honorable member, can you take your seat? Can I address you? Honorable members, can you take your seats? Including Honorable Stenhazen.
I'm not finished my point of order.
Can you take your
We're
seat?
not going to be intimidated
Can you
by
please
whites here.
take your seat, Honorable?
There's no white man who's going to...
Honorable man.
It's not going to
Order.
happen.
Honorable members. Honorable members of the DA and the EFF, can you take your seats? You have disrupted one another on the point of order. I will now allow the President to respond on the question. I will talk to the chief whips of both parties. Yes, Honorable Stenhazen, because you actually stood up and you went on and started responding to Honorable Malima. I'm now ruling. President, can you please answer the question?
Madam House Chair.
You are
Order.
not going to speak
Order.
yet. Why not? You are not going to speak
Order,
yet.
honorable members.
You are not going to speak yet. You are
Honorable
not
Chair,
going to speak.
Honorable Malima. Can you please take your seats? Can you take your seats, honorable members? I have allowed the President, I've allowed the President to respond. I've allowed the President to respond. Can you allow me to chair? Order. Take your seat, Honorable. Take your seat. Honorable Stenhazen. Yes, I hear you. Allow me to rule. Can you please allow me to rule that for now the President must respond? No. With respect, I'm also asking you to take your seat. Can you take your seat? Can you take your seat? Order, honorable members. Can the House be in order? Honorable President, can you respond? Honorable Stenhazen, I will address you with your other point of order when the President has responded to the question. President, can you respond to the question?
Honorable House Chair, I actually had responded. Unless there is another question, I'm rather sad and taken aback by and almost handicapped by what's happening now. But I had responded. And I guess my response had been to Honourable Steenhuisen in the way that I was trying to answer him. So I'm ready for the next question, Honourable Chair. Thank you.
Thank you,
House
Honourable
Chairperson.
President. Honourable members, can you take your seats? I ruled that I will give the President an opportunity. On Rule 67, in terms of our own rules, which is the rule of precedence of presiding officer, whenever the presiding officer addresses the House during a debate, any member then speaking or offering to speak must resume his or her seat, and the presiding officer must be heard without interruption. I tried several times to members who were raising points of order against the points of order, and you did not observe the rule. That is why at the end I had to use my discretion to actually say, I will speak to both parties' chief whips, whose members were even at the point of physical fight. In order to bring order to the House, I ruled, and I still rule, that I will now give the opportunity to the President to address the next question. You may have a problem, Honourable Steenhuisen. I will request that that matter. Honourable Steenhuisen, protection must be offered equally to all members of the House. And at the moment, I have ruled no. Honourable Steenhuisen, Rule 67 still applies. I am speaking and you shall listen. Honourable Chair.
Honourable
President, can you please answer?
Honourable Chair.
Honourable Shibambo, can you please ask
Honourable
a
Chair.
supplementary question?
Honourable Chair.
Honourable Plowam.
You did not recognize me. I have a point of order.
Honourable Shibambo, can you take your seat? What's your point of order?
Honourable House Chair, I do respect your ruling.
Yes.
But I think we cannot allow in this House for someone to say white can't speak in this House.
Honourable member.
We cannot.
Honourable member.
And listen, Honourable House Chair.
Can you finish your point of order?
Sit down.
Order.
Sit down.
Honourable.
Sit down.
Honourable
House Chair.
Makaula. Honourable Makaula.
Never point at me.
Honourable Kaula.
Never.
Honourable Plowama.
Never. Fuck off.
Honourable Plowama. Can you please take him out? Honourable Plowama. Honourable Paulson. Sergeant in Arms, can you please take those members out? Honourable Plowama. Honourable Plowama. Can you please, the protection services come in? Can we suspend the House for 5 minutes?
No, chaps.
Protection services.
President, the FFA government already outseen. No, but we can't be intimidated. No, President, they can't intimidate us. We have a democratic right to be here. No, President, I can't. No.
All right, those are the live visuals coming out of Parliament this afternoon, where President Cyril Ramaphosa was answering questions in the National Assembly when chaos broke. This started, of course, between the Democratic Alliance Chief Whip, John Steenhuisen, and the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, Julius Malema. Steenhuisen calling the EFF members VBS looters. And in return, the Commander-in-Chief Malema saying that Steenhuisen is a young racist white man who's been accused of of rape. So there were many point of orders, of course, passed. The House Chair tried to calm the situation down, of course, and Ahang member Akawama came in with this point of order as well. And of course, chaos once again broke between Mr. Kawama and the EFF again, of course, this chaos being very much physical. The House Chair saying that they will have to recess for about 5 minutes, but from what we're seeing now, it looks like the House is back in order. Let's just take you back to Parliament.
Parliament. Thank you very much. Parliament.
All right.
Order, honourable members. Order. Can you please take your seats? Can you please take your seats? Order, honourable members. Order, can you please take your seats? I have requested that the chief whips, they have a meeting tomorrow to address one of the matters of conduct on the floor. Honourable Plowama was not yet done with the point of order, on which none of you do not know how I was going to rule. I have then asked him to leave the House because he allowed himself and another member to engage on a scuffle. Order, honourable members. Order. Order, honourable members. Honourable Plowama insulted. I was listening and I was on the floor. Order, honourable member. I then asked the Sergeant at Arms to take both. Honourable Paulson, can you please leave the House? Can you please leave the House? Honourable Paulson, can you please leave the House? Those two members, I will report to the Speaker so that their matter is dealt with in terms of their conduct. Honourable Nkwankwa, what's your point of order? What's your point of order? What's your point of order?
Right to make their points here. Whether we agree with them or not, they should be allowed to make those points. Kawama was busy making his point, and so is Tenhazen, by the way. We can't allow ourselves to be intimidated. People must allow us to express our views. When we're done, they can stand up and make their points.
Order, thank you very much. Can you take your seat? Honourable Nkwankwa, I correctly agree with you. However, all members in the House, those who ask the point of order and those who are seated, none of all of us have the right to then continue the scuffle and make disparaging comments and insult one another. In the earlier debate, that's why I had to rule so that the House can proceed. And I said, if any member has a problem, there are protocols on how we raise the problems on the ruling of the chair. And I was just informing all of you in this House that I've taken a decision to suspend those two members of the House out. I'm now proceeding with the question. Honourable Stenhazen, what's your point of order?
Rule 85. It's Rule 85, House Chairperson.
Yes.
The Honourable Belema very clearly called me a racist and a effing white boy and a whole lot of other epithets. Those are unparliamentary. It is never parliamentary to call another member of the House racist.
No, you called me names before.
Order.
You called me names before.
Order.
You called me names
can you
before.
take your seat?
Why did you call me a
Can you
VBS
take your
looter?
seat? Honourable Malima, can you take your seat?
I would ask that he's asked to withdraw those comments. They are unparliamentary and have no place in this parliament.
Order. Honourable member. Honourable members, can you allow the chair to run the House? There are issues I raised earlier, Honourable Steenhuisen. There are disparaging remarks you raised. I'm not saying racist is a point of order. I mean, it's not a point. I will protect all members of the House. And I will make my ruling tomorrow on both your statement and Honourable Malima's statement. I will. Thank you very much. Honourable Shibambo, it's now your
Thank you very much,
opportunity.
House Chair. You know, Samora Machel used to say that if you are applauded by white people, you must know something is wrong with you. So those who have been applauded by white people here, they must know that there's something wrong with them. But I want to talk about public debt, President. That South Africa's debt to GDP ratio is now approaching 60%. And by all forms of measure and predictions, South Africa's economy will not grow by more than 2% in the next 3 years. That's a fact of the matter. In the entire medium-term expenditure framework, like in the 3 years budget allocations, the biggest expenditure item will be debt services, followed by education, health, and other things. So like servicing debt services, meaning that we're going to be expending like more than 200 billion rands dealing with that. We're talking about the China debt now in terms of what should happen. When the Minister of Finance was presenting the MTBPS, it didn't come out clear in terms of how do we deal with public debt. What is the most believable strategy to deal with huge public debt in South Africa? Because the economy is not growing and we're faced with the challenge of expenditure. So what should happen? Please respond to that.
President.
Honourable House Chair and Honourable Shibambu, clearly, as clearly articulated by the Minister of Finance, we are concerned about our debt profile, and particularly in relation to the debt service costs that imposes on us. The costs that we incur in servicing our debts are growing exponentially higher than all the other expenditure items on our budget. And the fact that we are now beginning to breach the 60% level is a matter of serious concern. Now, how are we going to address this? We obviously have to address this through the fiscal prudency that we've always spoken about. But in the end, we've got to spend within our limits, and that does not mean that we immediately go into austerity measures, but we've got to embark on priority expenditure type of solutions, which is what we are going to be looking at as we craft the next budget, because we just cannot continue seeing our debt growing at an alarming rate. So we will be coming up with solutions. We obviously want to generate more economic growth that will help to address this challenge that we face. But we are in a difficult situation, and the best way out is to spend more prudently and also to grow our economy. And there are a number of expenditure items that we need to look at, and which we are already beginning to communicate to all and sundry that we've got to watch and keep our eyes on that. But we will continue to manage our public finances in a much more prudent way. One of the better things that I think this new period has yielded is that, one, we are aware of the problems and the challenges, but we have already started curbing reckless expenditure, curbing corruption, curbing malfeasance, and with that we will be able to roll back the expenditure processes that were completely out of kilter with our budgetary prudency. So we are on the way of doing precisely that, but we've got to repair quite a number of areas as we move forward. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, President. Honourable Singh.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Chairperson, millions of Hindus, Mr. President, across the world will celebrate Diwali tomorrow, including myself.
Yes.
And I expected some fireworks tomorrow, but not today, in the House. Now, Honourable President, you give us an assurance that South Africa, as the perception is across Africa, will not become the cash and carry of China. There is a fear out there that that is exactly what it's going to become, because there are examples, for example, in Sri Lanka, where the port has now been ceded to Chinese. Now, instead of borrowing from the Chinese Development Bank, why are we not using the BRICS Bank, which of China is a participant, but it is a more inclusive bank? Why are we not using the BRICS Bank to borrow from to meet our debts for SOEs or for any other developmental program? Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable Singh, you might have heard the Minister of Finance as he was outlining the stimulus and economic recovery plan, including the partners that we will be seeking to obtain finance from. And the new development bank is one of such. We have already had a discussion with them about a facility that will help us bolster our infrastructure fund. And remember that we are shareholders in the new development bank. We have put money which was voted for by this parliament, and so therefore we are insiders. And the terms that we will be able to get are terms that are fairly friendly, and we will be able to get long-term financing with easy terms of payback. So we are going to be able to get muscle for capital investment. You may well say more debt, but in the end, when you are borrowing, which many countries do, by the way, around the world, for capital expenditure, it's very, very different from borrowing from consumption expenditure. Now, what the new drive is all about is to focus on real investment, in capital investment, putting infrastructure on the ground, and investing in areas that are going to yield better returns for the people of our country. But at the same time, creating a very good balance in the management of our finances to make sure that the process of ensuring that our people, particularly those who are dependent on the grants, the processes that we've got to get involved in for education, health, and others continue. So we have to create a very good balance. But the new thrust that I'd like to communicate, Honourable Singh, is that, yes, we are going to be focusing more on capital expenditure, and we will be watching this scale that Honourable Shibambo spoke about not breaching in an overly manner the debt, the GDP debt ratio, because we need to keep that in check so that our servicing costs do not grow exponentially. So we have to create a very delicate balance, but at the same time invest so that our economy continues to grow. Now, if we can drive economic development and growth, we should be able to begin to turn this around. Unfortunately, it will take us some time. As Treasury has also postulated, it will not happen within a year or 2 years. It will take us some time, but we will begin to see the needle moving in the right way. I can assure you that the prudent management of our resources is in good hands, and we will continue to make sure that it does happen in a correct manner for the interests of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President. Honourable Telezi, you wanted to rise on a point of order earlier.
Yes, Madam House Chair. Just for my guidance, during the brawl, I had an honourable member referring to other members as these whites. I just want that for guidance to know in future whether we're going to refer to each other as these whites or these blacks. Because I think that when the head of state is actually answering questions and a remark like this is made, I think it would be grossly irresponsible on my part to just let it go. I just want for guidance for the future.
Thank you, Honourable Telezi.
Honourable
Indeed, in terms of guidance, it is unparliamentary. that's why I said I will reflect on all the matters because there were many rules that were broken during that period. I said I'm not condoning what happened, but there are a lot of things that happened which ended in the chaos that was. And I will give a ruling tomorrow on all of those matters. Rule 67 was broken, Rule 69, Rule 82, Rule 84, Rule 48, and Rule 92. And Rule 85, all of which during the period that you are referring to. Honourable Malima, can you please take your seat? I will consider you on your point of order. So I will reflect on all of them and come back to the House, because even the way in which we now tend to raise the point of orders is not in accordance with the rules, which at times create the brawl that we saw happening earlier. So, Honourable Buthelezi, the matter is not concluded, but one had to bring the order to the House so that we can continue with the business of the House. And that's why I also said, Chief Whips will have to meet, as they are meeting tomorrow, reflect on this issue. Because several times I asked Chief Whips of both parties to actually talk to their members, because some of the statements that were said earlier on were breaking one of our rules in terms of impugning on the character of other members. That is why I said, allow me, as the presiding officer, to have a comprehensive ruling. No one will be spared who actually went against our rule. So, indeed, it's not acceptable, but we'll have to come back to this House, because I felt if we had to continue, it was going to actually disrupt the House even worse than it happened earlier on. I hope you will agree with me. Thank you very much. Honourable Malima, what's your point of order?
No, I also want to raise my concern that I've been called here a VBS looter. And when I stand up to defend myself, now there are some people with some morality which only sees one side and do not take into consideration what transpired before we uttered the words we uttered.
That's
I will never, let me speak, Chair, because the rest of other people were given an opportunity.
I thought you were done. Okay, you can finish.
I will never submit to whiteness. I don't care where it takes place. I will never subject myself to whiteness. And whiteness must be called out and be put at its rightful place and be called by its rightful name.
Can you take a seat, Honourable
And if there is a punishment for that, I'm ready to take it.
Take your
I will
seat,
never keep
Honourable
quiet
Member.
if we are threatened here by whiteness.
Okay, Honourable Member, can you please take your seat? That's exactly why, order, Honourable Members, that's exactly why I said the rules that I've mentioned are all the rules that in that process were actually impacted upon by members of this House. And I will rule tomorrow. Honourable Members, can we now move with the business of the day? We're left with one question. Question 35, which was asked by Honourable Makubela Mashele to the President. Honourable President.
Honourable House Chair, this question addresses possibly the issue that seems to have emerged in this House, as you have observed, and dealing with issues of ethnic chauvinism and narrow nationalism. Nelson Mandela represented the hopes of millions of South Africans who dreamt of a life unshackled from a system that sought to stifle their potential by virtue of race or ethnicity. The emergence of ethnic chauvinism and narrow nationalism represents a direct challenge to the hopes of our people and the hopes of our Constitution and the values of our Constitution. We need to respond to these tendencies as a society. While there is much that government can do to reinforce the principles of our Constitution, this is necessarily a task that must be undertaken by all parts of our society. This is a responsibility that falls on the shoulders of all of us as South Africans, of parents, community structures, schools, faith-based organizations, employers, trade unions, civil society, and indeed all public bodies, but all South Africans. It is important that we should reaffirm the values that are enshrined in our Constitution, which clearly says that South Africa belongs to all the people who live in it, irrespective of their race, culture, creed, or religion. And for its part, government sees schools as a fundamental foundation for advancing social cohesion and nation building. It introduced the National Identity Passport of Patriotism in schools in 2014, which contains many of our important symbols that define our national identity. It is finalizing the auditing of teaching and learning material for latent racism, sexism, stereotypes, and other forms of discrimination. A teacher's guide has been developed to provide practical ways for schools to promote the rights and the responsibilities of children, and indeed should also mean citizens. It shows how a rights and responsibilities culture can be built into the school and the classroom management. We have promoted the recital of the preamble to our Constitution in public schools and printed the preamble on the cover of the workbook on life orientation. We have also introduced the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill, which gives effect to our obligations in terms of the Constitution and international human rights instruments concerning racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerances. Constitutional awareness campaigns through the media, highlighting the constitutional values that we have embraced, continue. Some departments have focused the campaign specifically on vulnerable and marginalized groups in our society. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development conducts community dialogues on racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance. The Department of Basic Education is incrementally introducing the African Languages Program in schools as part of promoting and increasing multilingualism in our schools. House Chair, the task of building a non-racial society cannot be separated from the task of redressing the huge material inequalities in our society. We therefore need to pursue all measures to combat racism, ethnic chauvinism, and narrow nationalism alongside a clear program to create jobs, to tackle poverty, and to transform the economy of our country. We all share a constitutional obligation to build a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society. As government, we are committed to fulfill our obligation in this regard, and in the end, it behoves on all of us, particularly here as members of Parliament, whether we are indeed going to subscribe not only to the values that are articulated in the preamble of our Constitution, but also in the Bill of Rights. That is very much the key body in our Constitution. The project of building a non-racial society in South Africa is a historic task, And it is a task that we cannot, in this day and in this hour, move away from. South Africa characterizes itself as a non-racial democracy, and that is what we must be. There should never be a time and an opportunity where we see each other as black, white, and so forth, and insult one another. There should never be times like that. We are South Africans, and this is what defines us. This is the key hallmark of what distinguishes us and separates us from many, many other peoples in the world. We are a nation that has been crafted from the crucible of oppression and racism and apartheid. We cannot go back to that horrible past that we have had. We are a non-racial democracy, and however painful it might be, and we still live with the pain of what apartheid did, we cannot revert to raw racism and separation of ourselves as this type and this type of people. We are one people, and we are being forged as one nation with one future and one vision. Let us live up to that as this parliament. That's who we are. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, President. Honourable Order, Honourable Member. Honourable Makubela Mashela.
Thank you, House Chair. Now, what we've witnessed this afternoon in this House is a clear indication that says we have all not rallied behind the project of nation building and social cohesion. And I hope with the response that the President has given to us, we will do a self-reflection and see how best as public representatives we lead by example. Because the nation cannot emulate what we have just done in this House this afternoon. Honourable President, now you've made a clarion call on your maiden SONA address, which talked to the Tumamina campaign. And that clarion call was for all South Africans, together with government, to use it as a vehicle towards social cohesion and nation building. Now, I want to know, what has departments been doing? Because as you've made that clarion call, be it as written or unwritten policy, it was for all government agencies, government departments, social partners, and all to rally behind and programmatize it and ensure that we forge ahead towards social cohesion and nation building using what you have given us as a vehicle. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable President.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Clearly, the social cohesion project that we have and the nation building task that we are supposed to engender in terms of our constitutional values is an important one. And it calls on all of us, be it as leaders sitting here and as government departments, to embrace that, but not only to do that, but to advocate it and promote it. Now, government departments are supposed to, by policy and by policy directive, are supposed to enhance social cohesion and make sure that the nation building project that we have is advanced further. Now, many government departments are committed to doing that. And indeed, in terms of, say, for instance, the SONA tasks that we set out, we are supposed to speed that up, to speed it up with a view of ensuring that indeed we do build a non-racial society in our country. Now, various departments are rolling that out. You've already heard how the Department of Basic Education, for instance, has taken the lead in as far as ensuring that the education materials that it is putting out, promotion of our languages, ensuring that the preamble is recited every day in schools, is part of that whole process and making sure that our children at that foundational level are taught about non-racialism and the importance of, for instance, our history, where we have come from. And other departments, the Department of Justice, and ensures that the Constitution is also spread and constitutional lessons are given. The department under Minister Mtetwa of Arts and Culture has printed all these documents and these pamphlets that promote the values of our Constitution and also ensures that our identity as a nation is prominently promoted so that everyone knows precisely who we are as South Africans, that we are a non-racial nation. Now, this is very important. It revolves around principle. I was in Germany recently, and I had a discussion with Chancellor Angela Merkel. And my reflection to her was, well, you seem to have really been firm on the issue of migration. And she said to me, she does compromise 10 or 20% on a whole number of issues. But on matters of principle, particularly on issues that have to do with solidarity with other people, migration being one of them, she said to me she is principled and she will remain firm. And similarly, on issues of non-racialism, we must all say we remain firm and we will not be moved because it is a matter of principle, because it speaks to where we come from, it speaks to where we want to go. We are South Africans who are meant to forge a united country, a united nation, and we cannot be taken back and almost be torn asunder by a chauvinism, a narrow chauvinism that seeks to promote just sectional interests. We are South Africans united in our diversity, and it is our diversity that we must promote. It is our diversity that we must be grateful for, because it is this that makes us stronger as we deal with the legacy, the terrible legacy that we've had in the past. So I'm articulating this and saying this has to be a matter of great principle, and we should never compromise on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Honourable Mulder.
Honourable President, all members of this House swore to uphold the Constitution when we became members. And one of the defining provisions of the Constitution we find in Chapter 1 that deals with the values enshrined in the Constitution. Section 1D deals with non-racialism. It seems perhaps that not all of us are devoted and committed to that oath that we took when we became members of this House. Now, Honourable Chairperson, the original question put to you identified ethnic chauvinism and narrow nationalism as the real threats to nation building, social cohesion. The point I wanted to make was that that's not the real threat. The real threat is blatant racism. And luckily or unluckily, today we saw exactly the example of what I was hoping to say. Blatant racism is rampant in South Africa, and we need to address that non-racialism. The question I would like to ask Honourable President is the following. One of the biggest disappointments for me is the Section 185 Commission, the Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Linguistic, Cultural and Religious Communities. That commission, as far as I'm concerned, have done everything but further promoted the rights. Are your government prepared to look into the functioning and the original Act 2002 to improve that
Honourable
Act?
Member,
Thank you, sir.
can you round up? Thank you. President.
We continue, Honourable House Chair, we continue to have discussions precisely on that Act. And we've continued to talk to a number of people about it. And I'm also prepared, Honourable Mulder, to have further engagements with yourselves on it. When we crafted it, we obviously wanted to build a South African nation, and we want to continue doing precisely that. So I would like to invite you that, yes, let us continue our collaboration and our discussions in that regard. Because we should be committed to ridding this country of racism, but we should also, much as you say, maybe that's not the real core of the question, we should also continue to rid our country of displays of ethnic chauvinism and a narrow nationalism, because that does not define us, that does not tell the whole world of what we are. So I'm prepared that we should continue the discussions around that act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honourable Filtane.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. It is very difficult to mix chalk and cheese. South Africa has a very disappointing Gini coefficient, which is influenced by sickening social disparities. We need a solvent to enhance social cohesion. Mandela was that product. He was the Mandela, the person of persons, who did not discriminate between ANC members and the rest of the South African population. But alas, the ANC has always projected him as its exclusive property, to the exclusion of everybody else. In the process, an opportunity to use him as a rallying point for social cohesion has been lost.
Honourable members.
Every time there was an event around him, you would see only and only ANC colors, not national colors, hoisted. What can you do to repair this reputational damage to such a good and great name going forward?
President.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. I would have crafted the question slightly differently, and I would have said, what can we do to enhance the reputation that Madiba has in as far as nation building and social cohesion, which is precisely what this government has been doing, particularly in this year when Madiba would have turned 100 years, as well as Mama Albertina Sisulu. What we have sought to do is to actually spread the message not only through our country, but throughout the world as well. We saw with great pride how the world embraced Madiba and what Madiba stood for and his values and the principles that he suffered or he lived for. How the whole world at the United Nations was able to dedicate a few hours just to talking about Madiba's life. In a few days, I will be going to the European Parliament, just precisely to continue this celebration of Madiba's life by the European Parliament. The African Union did exactly the same thing when we held the African Union Summit in Nouakchott in Mauritania. So the whole world continues to regale itself in the aura and the memory of Madiba, and similarly in our country as well. And obviously, as these moments are held, people will wear regalia that associate them with what Madiba stood for. And we have never sought, never sought as a government to prevent South Africans as a whole to celebrate Madiba's life, to associate themselves with Madiba. And in fact, even his own organization, the African National Congress, has known forever and in a day that Madiba does not only belong to the community in Vezo, does not only belong to his family, does not only belong to the African National Congress. He does not only belong to us as South Africans, he belongs to the whole world. And that is why we must be proud to embrace Madiba in that way and to celebrate his life. Thank you, Honourable House Chair.
Thank you very much, President. Honourable Kubisa.
Thank you, House Chairperson. It is blatantly clear, Honourable President, that the matter must be attended to in a holistic manner. As you have alluded to, that there are so many structural inequalities
within our country, embedded within our society, in the workplace, within schools, etc. Now, I want to know, within the ambit of the law, what is it that can be urgently and robustly done to ensure that we once and for all do away with this narrow nationalism and ethnic chauvinism? Thank you.
President.
House Chair, thank you. Honourable Kubisa, the processes that we are involved in, which I articulated in terms of spreading this message and inculcating this culture of non-racism in our children, in various programs that we embark upon as government, is precisely aimed at ensuring that we all embrace a non-racial culture and show that South Africa indeed, in truth and in effect, is seen as a country that belongs to all of us who live in it. So within the broader ambits, not only of the law, but of our Constitution, there are many things that we should continue doing. And I guess today's debate or discussion on this matter is particularly one gives us a number of ideas of precisely some of the things that we should do. Because having come from this terrible past that we have come from, clearly there is still a long road to turning our country into a truly non-racial South Africa where we are able to tolerate one another in the diversity that is the makeup of our society. So there is a lot that we can do, and we want to rely on the wisdom of all of us to come up with a number of interventions, a number of initiatives and programs that can enhance the social cohesion and the nation-building project that we have of necessity to embark upon. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you very much, President, for answering the last question, and I would ask you to take your seat. Thank you, President. Ordinarily, I would have said this has brought us to the end of the question to the President and the House agenda, but I think it is important as a presiding officer and on behalf of this House to actually apologize to you for what happened during the question session. And also thank you for having been patient and allowed to continue with the question regardless of what has happened. And I'm sure in the last question, you spoke to some of the issues that happened here today. And I would like to thank you for actually having honored us with the extension of time. I also want to indeed say to members, none of us can be proud about what happened in the House today. And I really think we should reflect a bit more, particularly the chief whips, on their role and what their responsibilities are on their members and on the House. That all of us as members should also relook at our rules and see how best we can implement them to the latter. Honorable members, I think we owe it to one another to be respectful, even though we may differ, but do so in a manner that respects the decorum of the House. I'd like to thank all of you, and indeed, Honourable Steenhuisen, I heard what you said. We will talk about it afterwards. Can the House adjourn for today? Thank you very much.
All right, well, there you have it, the House Chairperson, Tokodi Diza, wrapping up questions and answer session by President Cyril Ramaphosa in Parliament. Let's just reflect a little on what the President spoke about, what he answered this afternoon before we dwell a little